In what was being viewed as one of the most unpredictable draft classes, one of the weakest classes in terms of star power that we've seen in over 2 decades, mock draft boards leading up to the draft all over the place. Well, we now have the 2024 draft in the books, and behind us, a draft filled with surprises, with players sliding in the draft, taken much lower than expected, while others getting snagged at the top of the board in what some thought was a bit of a reach given a player's talent. But regardless of where you stand in terms of your thoughts on this draft class and the talent level coming out of it, there were a lot of wins for some teams who were able to find some gems later in the draft or capitalizing on players who slid further than expected. And so in today's video, we're going to be discussing who were some of the biggest winners from the 2024 draft, and I would love to hear who you guys believe came out ahead the most from this class. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. We are very, very close to 75,000 subscribers, so let's see if we can get there before the start of the regular season. Now, as we talked about before, there was absolutely no consensus in this 2024 draft class. There was no sure thing in terms of which player was going to be drafted where, with the exception of Bronny James being selected 55th overall. That was about the only guarantee from this entire draft class. But as we've also talked about before, just because there wasn't any guaranteed future superstars from this class, there was still a lot of talent to be had throughout the draft. And in this class, it was more about finding those gems that might be getting overlooked. Now, of course, we have no idea how some of these players are going to show up when they ultimately start playing in the league. It's so hard to say now which players are going to pan out and which ones won't. But based on what we know, the scouting reports of some of these players and the selections made by various teams and its fit to their overall roster, I do think there were some clear winners from this draft in the early going. And the first team I'm going to start with is actually the Utah Jazz, who I believe had an excellent draft when you consider the 3 picks they had available to them and who they were able to land with those picks relative to where they were selecting. For me, I'm actually not as focused on getting Cody Williams at number 10, even though I do think Williams is going to be a great player, has a lot of upside, and will fit perfectly with the core that they have. But Williams was more or less expected to go around 10th overall. Most mock drafts had him ranging anywhere between 9 and 12. But the bigger pickups, the steals of the draft, if you will, was the fact that they were able to get Isaiah Collier at 29 and then Kyle Filipowski in the second round with the 32nd overall pick. These were 2 players that some mock boards had going in the lottery earlier in the season. Isaiah Collier was the #1 recruit out of his class coming out of high school. Now, yes, he didn't have a good year at USC. There were a lot of questions about his game as it relates to his streaky shooting, prone to turnovers, but the dude is an athlete who can score and get to the bucket at will. We'll see how his game translates to the NBA, and we'll also see what this means for the future of Colin Sexton in Utah, and the Jazz may look to actually flip him for more assets and have Collier being that starting guard. But the fact is that they were able to get value with that 29th pick in a weak class for a player with a lot of upside, in my opinion, is a big win for them. And then Kyle Filipowski, I was shocked to see him fall all the way into the second round. I mean, you're talking about a guy who can handle the ball, shoot it from outside, crash the boards, is actually pretty mobile and a great finisher at the rim. I mean, to get a player like Filipowski in the second round as a backup to potentially Walker Kessler and to continue to develop him while you're rebuilding this roster is a solid get. Based on the direction of this franchise and presumably looking to capitalize on their pick in 2025, in addition to all the other picks they've acquired in the Gobert and Donovan Mitchell trades, I would say this was a great return in this draft for the Utah Jazz. Another winner from this draft, got to be the San Antonio Spurs. I absolutely love this pickup for them of Stephon Castle with the #4 pick. Some might view it as a bit of a reach to take Castle that high, but Castle is the best guard of this draft in my opinion. A player who has a great feel for the game, good instincts, plays very well in the pick and roll. And what do the Spurs need more than anything right now? A higher IQ point guard that is going to maximize Wemby on offense, getting him better looks around the basket, operating effectively in the pick and roll. Yeah, maybe the Spurs could have gone with a player like Saloon or Buzelis or even Donovan Clingan, but Castle is the best fit with a player like Victor Wembanyama, which is what the Spurs should be focused on right now, as he is the future of that franchise. And then also for the Spurs, how about trading their #8 pick to the Wolves, which they used to select Rob Dillingham, and getting more assets for their future in return? It's not like they really needed that pick, given they just got their point guard that they wanted in Stephon Castle at #4. And then the next team that came out ahead of this draft, which I know you guys are going to say that I'm super biased, but I'm going to try and put my biases aside as much as possible and explain why the Bulls were winners in this draft by selecting Matas Buzelis at #11 overall. Look, the Bulls are about to be going into a rebuild. I know it might not seem like it right now because they still have DeMar, Vucevic, and Zach LaVine at the time of this recording anyway, but it's believed by most that the direction of this franchise is heading on the path of a youth movement to build for the future. And given that direction, direction. And given that direction, the Bulls absolutely had to hit on their pick at 11 and get a player with the most upside. And if you look at a lot of the mock drafts dating all the way back to the beginning of last season through the final weeks of leading up to this draft, you will not find a single mock draft board that has Buzelis falling out of the top 10. Not a single one. Most mock drafts have Buzelis going top 5, at worst 7th overall. Now, initially, there was talk of the Bulls trading up in this draft to get Matas Buzelis, and had the Bulls actually done that and traded future assets to move up to, say, 5 or 6 to get him, then no, I would not have had them as one of the winners of this draft. And in fact, I would have said that was a poor decision given the uncertainty of this draft class, and risking future assets to move up in a weak class would not be smart. But because Buzelis slid all the way to 11, a player who some analysts and scouts believe could be the best player from this class when all is said and done, with a ton of upside. A big man who handles the ball like a guard, has great court vision, can push the ball in transition but also play off the ball in the catch and shoot, good instincts playing defense off ball, great timing on his leaping ability to block shots. And for the Bulls, a team whose future has been so bleak in recent years, to get one of the better prospects of this class and not have to trade up to get him, a player they can develop for the future and also already fits a position of need with the Bulls' lack of size, is a big win for this franchise. I will say the other win from this draft, and a player I also wanted the Bulls to actually take if he was available at 11, but he would go in the pick right after Buzelis, was Nikola to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder somehow, once again, come out winners in this draft. This time snagging a player who for a while was considered to be the presumed number 1 pick of this draft. A player with incredible skills for a big guard that can pass, score, high motor and quick first step in getting the basket. Obviously it's a risky move because he's coming off an ACL injury and he more than likely will miss his whole rookie season. But if you're the Thunder, you have the luxury of taking on that risk. You were already the number 1 seed in the Western Conference last season. You're still a young, up-and-coming team that is already going to be great as currently constructed, especially after landing Alex Caruso in the trade deal. So it's not like you needed a player that could come in right away and start contributing. You let him rehab his injury, bring him back the following season, and you now have yet another young prospect to help you build with for the future. The other thing I liked about what the Thunder did is they made a lot of trades in the second round. They used some of their draft arsenal to land another player with upside in Dylan Jones. They traded to get AJ Mitchell in the second round. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep all these guys for the long term on their roster, but it puts them in a position to trade more of these assets for win-now type pieces. Some other winners, maybe on a smaller scale, but I actually really like the Pistons pick at number 5. I'm really high on Ron Holland and think he's going to be one of the best players from this draft class. I actually thought it was a possibility he would slide outside of the top 10, so good on them for taking him for a player that fits their timeline and their need for added scoring in the backcourt. I like what the Kings did and what they were able to get with the 13th pick in Devin Carter, a prospect that is more NBA ready at the age of 22 and can start contributing now with a lot of two-way potential. Big time hustle player, finishes well at the rim despite his size, lockdown perimeter defender, and for the Kings, a team that is still looking to try and compete now, snagging a player in the late lottery that they can actually use rather than a project player is a big win in my opinion. And then I know this is going to sound crazy, but to be honest, one of the bigger winners of this draft was the LA Lakers. Not necessarily for winning or getting guys that are going to help them contribute to winning, but winning from a business perspective and revenue perspective, and also ensuring they can keep LeBron James for potentially the final year of his career by drafting Bronny James at 55. Look, I know some have said what a waste of a pick by taking a non-NBA level prospect at 55. And while yes, that's absolutely true, I've said before I don't think Bronny is an NBA level player. The only reason he was drawing any interest as a prospect was because of his dad. I think we all know that. But at the same time, who else are you really getting that is going to contribute with the 55th pick in a weak draft class? Whoever it would have been, that player more than likely was getting cut anyway. So I wouldn't call it a wasted pick when the chances of hitting on a player that late in the draft are so few and far between. Now, had the Lakers traded up in the draft to get him, or hell, used that first round pick that they had at 17 to select Bronny James, yeah, that would have been a disaster, and we would have all clowned the Lakers for it. But instead of the Lakers taking on some prospect that was probably more deserving at 55, they used the pick 1 to keep their superstar, one of the greatest players in the game of basketball, happy and staying with their franchise, but also the attention, the revenue, the merchandise, the clickbait, all of it, to be the team that has the first ever father-son pairing in basketball. I mean, that in and of itself is a win, even if Bronny doesn't amount to anything in the NBA. Now, I will say I actually like the pick that the Lakers made at 17, Dalton Knecht. I believe he was the oldest player in the draft. He's more NBA ready than a lot of the other prospects in this class. A lights out shooter, which is something the Lakers desperately needed. And Knecht was in some mock drafts going as high as number 5. So to be able to get him with the 17th pick and sliding that far is actually a solid pickup for them. But yeah, the real win for the Lakers is ensuring those high ticket sales remain and the relevancy of their franchise stays intact, even if only for a short while, by using the 55th pick to get Bronny James. But anyway, those are my biggest winners from the NBA draft of 2024. I'll likely do a video on some of the biggest losers as well. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. Let me know who you thought were some of the biggest winners from this draft. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.